Hi, it's Nicole from A Day of Small Things. Let's continue with our deep dive into The Merchant of Venice. The first week, we saw Shylock comparing Antonio to a fawning publican. And last week, we went through a brief history of Jews in medieval England. Today, Shylock mentions a certain Nazarite. Act 1, Scene 3, in dialogue between Bassanio and Shylock, Bassanio lays out the terms of the deal: 3,000 ducats for 3 months, Antonio bound. Shylock says, "May I speak with Antonio? If it please you to dine with us." "Yes, to smell pork, to eat of the habitation which your prophet, the Nazarite, conjured the devil into. I will buy with you, sell with you, talk with you, walk with you, and so following, but I will not eat with you, drink with you, nor pray with you." To smell pork, to eat of the habitation which your prophet, the Nazarite, conjured the devil into. What is he on about? It's the story of Oink Splash in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I'll read you the one in Mark's Gospel in King James Version. "And they," Jesus and his disciples, "came over onto the other side of the sea," this is the Sea of Galilee, "into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him, and always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was there nigh unto the mountain a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out, and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000, and were choked in the sea. And they that fed the swine fled, and told it in the city and in the country, and they went out to see what it was that was done. And they come to Jesus, and see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion, sitting and clothed, and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And they that saw it told them how it befell to him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coasts. According to this gospel account, Jesus the Nazarite restored a man to his right mind by casting the demons into a herd of 2,000 pigs. This is the story Shylock refers to when he says, Yes, to smell pork, to eat of the habitation which your prophet, the Nazarite, conjured the devil into. You might be familiar with the King James Version of the Bible, but for me, reading King James Version is always a fresh experience. For example, it is demons, plural, that possess the man in both English Standard Version and New International Version, but King James Version repeats 3 times that the man was possessed with the devil, singular, which makes pork sound a lot more deadly to consume. In the lines we are discussing today from Act 1, Scene 3, Bassanio invites Shylock to a meal. We know there's a lavish party happening that evening because even before Bassanio's invitation, the dinner was already mentioned 3 times in Act 1, Scene 1. Lorenzo and Graciano keep talking about it, and in Act 2, Scene 2, we see Bassanio giving orders and his servants bustling about, getting it ready. In Act 2, Scene 4, we hear Lorenzo's plot to elope with Jessica during the dinner, and in Act 2, Scene 5 and 6, we watch Shylock receiving the invitation and leaving Jessica alone in the house, setting off for the dinner, and immediately after that, we witness the elopement. The location switches to Belmont, where we watch the Prince of Morocco choosing the gold casket. By the time we return to Venice, the dinner has finished. There's so much building up for this dinner, and in the blink of an eye, it's gone without a single detail. The next thing we hear is a scene reported from a third party. Why, man, I saw Bassanio under sail. With him is Graciano gone along, and in their ship I am sure Lorenzo is not. The villain Jew with outcries raised the Duke, who went with him to search Bassanio's ship. I never heard a passion so confused, so strange, outraged, and so variable as the dog Jew did utter in the streets. My daughter, oh my ducats, oh my daughter, fled with a Christian, oh my Christian ducats, justice, the law, my ducats, and my daughter. Bassanio had left for Belmont. Shylock had lost his daughter and ducats. I find the phrase my Christian ducats most intriguing. His ducats are surely Jewish ducats. What does he mean, my Christian ducats? Is it because he made the money by lending money to Christians? Ducats that came from Christian purses? What do you think? Anyway, on the topic of the absence of the dinner, I read an essay called I Will Not Eat With You, Failures of Commensality in the Merchant of Venice. The title, as you probably have noticed, is taken from the lines we are discussing today. Commensality is the practice of eating together. Goldstein observes that there are a lot of references to eating, food, meals, and feasts, but quoting directly from the essay, there is virtually no staged eating in the play. The significance of this invisible dinner looms large the more I reflect on the play. It is during the dinner that the elopement happens. Although we've seen in the previous video that Shylock dislikes Antonio right from the first scene, it is the event during this dinner that solidifies his hatred and triggers the action of his revenge. Seen from Shylock's point of view, it is a break of trust. I am bid forth for supper, Jessica. There are my keys. But wherefore should I go? I am not bid for love. They flatter me, but yet I'll go in hate to feed upon the prodigal Christian. Jessica, my girl, look to my house. I am right loath to go. Shylock does not want to go, interestingly, not mainly because it breaks Jewish customs, but because he knows he is not a welcomed guest. I am not bid for love, they flatter me, because they need my money. But he compromises. Whether he touches the food or not, we do not know, but he goes. As soon as he leaves, some Christian man comes and steals his only daughter and his money. He feels his trust and goodwill betrayed. Or maybe there's no goodwill, he does say, I'll go in hate. Whichever the case, he feels like a fool. The Christians have conspired against him. One gets him out of the house, another takes the advantage to steal. Although I'm not sure if Bassanio or Antonio is in the know. Maybe that's why Shylock takes the revenge on Antonio, who neither invites him to dinner nor steals from him. In Shylock's mind, all Christians are equally guilty in his disaster and suffering. Let's return to Goldstein's essay, I Will Not Eat With You, for a moment. I was very excited when I discovered the first section of this essay is called Your Prophet, the Nazarite. It's always very satisfying when a scholar directly engages in the topic you are thinking about. It puzzled me for a while why Shylock says, I will not eat or drink with you, and then immediately adds, I will not pray with you. Eating and drinking has little to do with praying. One is to do with the physical body, while the other belongs to the spiritual realm. The connection only becomes clear when considering the implication of sharing a meal. It doesn't just signify friendship and community, but what is more formally termed commensality, the practice of eating together, of sharing a table. Eating and drinking are ordinary everyday activities, but in a Christian context, the image of sharing a meal can readily evoke the image of sharing the Lord's Supper. If you think about it in this way, the acts take on profound symbolic and spiritual meaning. In the context of religion, few practices carry greater spiritual significance than Holy Communion. So, two things are interesting here. Shylock refuses pork by referring to a New Testament story instead of Leviticus laws. Then he refuses sharing a meal by implying it's too much like taking Holy Communion, which is a New Testament idea. It's curious that Shylock maintains the religious boundary using the Christian Bible, your prophet, the Nazarite. That leads to my next observation, how identity is interpreted. Shylock doesn't see Jesus the way Christians do. For him, Jesus isn't the divine Son of God, just a prophet. And Shakespeare creates a similar kind of tension when Shylock talks about the law, like we discussed in the last video. It's basically, you won't eat with us, and we don't want to eat with you either. You reject our religion, and we reject yours. It all comes down to perspective. So, who gets to decide what scripture really means? Who has the authority to define who Jesus is? Shakespeare seems to be pushing his audience to step outside their own viewpoint, to see things from someone else's perspective, whether that's someone from a different religion or a different race. And that's one of the most important things literature does. It reminds us that even if other people are different from us, they still think, feel, and experience the world just as deeply as we do. Let's return to that story of Oink Splash in Mark's Gospel. Shylock brings it up with a real sense of sarcasm and contempt, pointing out what he sees as the inconsistency in Christian behavior. Basically, he's saying, if you take your scripture seriously, why would you eat pork, which is plainly portrayed as unclean? It is witty and rhetorically skillful. Of course, Shylock doesn't mention there's another incident after Oink Splash where Jesus declares all food clean, but you have to admit he knows this text surprisingly well, especially for someone who does not even accept the New Testament as scripture. So what do we know from this small conversation today? We connect the dots between a few things. The New Testament story of Jesus casting demons into a herd of pigs, the echo of Holy Communion, Shylock's interpretation of scripture, the curious arguments he uses to refuse sharing a meal with Christians, and lastly, the importance of that meal, which does not happen on stage. There is a certain pride in Shylock, both in his religion and in his wealth, which are the two pillars, I think, that props up the roof over his fragile identity. As we saw in the last video, Jews in England since medieval time are always temporary residents, with their fortune waxes and wanes depending on the whims of the king. Both Shylock's religion and wealth are taken away by the end of the play, his pride broken and identity lost. The outcome of the trial is not just humiliation. It strips Shylock of his sense of self. Maybe that is why it's so hard to watch his downfall. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.